Close the bathroom door, pull the curtains, put in headphones so nobody hears your call. You do dozens of small things every single day to carve out a little bubble where nobody's watching, nobody's listening, nobody knows what you're doing. It feels like the most basic human need there is. Here's the question nobody actually thinks to ask. Did that bubble exist for most of human history? Not in the vague sense of people probably wanted some space. Actually existed, structurally, physically, as something ancient humans could reliably get. The honest answer is stranger than yes or no. Picture this: one shelter, one fire, 12 people, a baby crying somewhere in the dark, someone coughing through the smoke, two people whispering close together, not quite quiet enough. Outside, something moves in the brush, and every head turns at once. That's not a scene from a nightmare. For most of the last 300,000 years, that was Tuesday night. Privacy, the version you know, a room of your own, a closed door, a guarantee nobody sees or hears you, simply didn't exist as a normal condition of life. And the reasons why involve architecture, survival math, and a completely different definition of the self than the one we walk around with today. Let's start with the physical reality, because it's blunter than most people expect. For the overwhelming majority of human history, people lived in single-room shelters, one space, everyone in it, sleeping, eating, arguing, having sex, giving birth, dying, all happening within a few feet of everyone else in the group. Archaeological reconstructions of early dwellings, from branch and hide shelters dating back hundreds of thousands of years to later roundhouses and longhouses, show almost no internal partitions, no bedrooms, no separate spaces for different activities. You can't excavate a thought, but you can excavate a floor plan, and the floor plan says something loud. There was nowhere to hide. This wasn't a design failure, though. It was often the only rational way to survive. A single fire is vastly more efficient to maintain than several. Shared body heat in cold climates could be the difference between waking up and not waking up, and a group sleeping in one space could react instantly to threats, a predator, an intruder, a fire spreading, in a way that scattered individuals sleeping alone simply couldn't. So the first blunt fact is this: physical privacy is a relatively recent invention, and for most of human history it wasn't available even to people who might have wanted it. But that raises another question. If nobody had walls, did anybody actually have privacy at all? Or did the concept just not exist yet? This is where it gets genuinely interesting. Anthropologists studying traditional and small-scale societies have documented something called acoustic and behavioral privacy, essentially social rules that create a version of privacy without any physical barrier at all. Think of it like an invisible agreement everyone signs without ever reading the fine print. A couple having sex a few feet away in a communal hut, a person grieving loudly, someone using a designated corner of the shelter for bodily functions. The physical distance is nearly zero, but the social behavior around it functions almost like a wall. Everyone present agrees, often without ever discussing it explicitly, to not look, not listen, not react. Privacy doesn't require a door, it requires control. And it turns out you can build that control out of manners just as effectively as you can build it out of drywall. This is a genuinely different technology for achieving the same goal. Instead of blocking the senses with material, you block attention with social convention. It's not weaker than a door. In some ways, it's more sophisticated because it requires an entire group to actively participate in maintaining someone else's dignity rather than relying on a passive object to do the work for them. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about, and it's the real key to this whole story. Modern privacy assumes something very specific, that there's an individual self, separate from the group, whose thoughts, actions, and body are fundamentally that person's own business and nobody else's. That idea, the sealed-off private individual, is itself a relatively modern cultural construction, heavily shaped by post-agricultural and especially post-industrial social structures. In many ancient and small-scale societies, identity was substantially more communal. A person's actions, health, emotional state, even their dreams, were often considered legitimately relevant to the entire group, not intrusions into some private domain. Try explaining, "That's none of your business," to someone whose culture never drew that particular line. It wouldn't just sound rude, it would barely make sense. This doesn't mean ancient humans felt zero discomfort at being observed. It means the specific modern anxiety around privacy. The feeling that your thoughts belong exclusively to you and intrusion is a violation is partly a product of a cultural framework that hadn't been invented yet. That said, it would be wrong to say ancient humans never wanted to be alone. The record shows plenty of evidence for deliberate withdrawal, vision quests, solitary hunting trips, isolated birthing huts used in many cultures specifically to separate a woman in labor from the rest of the group, ritual isolation periods for young people undergoing coming-of-age ceremonies. Solitude, being physically alone, was recognized and in some contexts deliberately protected. But solitude and privacy aren't the same animal wearing different coats. Solitude is about being alone. Privacy is about controlling what others know about you while you're not alone. Ancient societies had real, structured versions of the first. The second existed in much more limited, situational forms, mostly built through convention rather than architecture. Now let's zoom out, because the shift toward the privacy we recognize today didn't happen all at once, and it tracks almost perfectly with two things: architecture and wealth. As agricultural societies grew more stratified, wealthier households began adding internal walls, separate sleeping quarters, designated rooms for specific people or functions. This wasn't universal, and it wasn't fast. In much of medieval Europe, even relatively well-off households often had servants sleeping in the same room as their employers, and multiple family members sharing a single bed was standard practice well into the modern era. Not purely out of necessity, but because the entire cultural expectation of a room of one's own hadn't fully formed yet. Which means, somewhat amusingly, that for most of history, having your own bedroom wasn't a basic human right, it was a flex. The bedroom as a private, single-occupant space is, historically speaking, an extremely recent and often class-restricted invention. For the vast majority of people, even into the last few centuries, sleeping alone in a private room was a luxury, not a baseline expectation. So did ancient humans have privacy? The honest answer is that they had a completely different system, built around the same underlying discomfort with total exposure, one made of social convention, deliberate non-acknowledgement, and specific rituals of solitude, rather than walls, locks, and doors. It wasn't weaker. It was adapted to a world where physical separation simply wasn't an option most people could afford, and where the self was understood as something the group had a legitimate stake in, not something sealed off behind a door with your name on it. The next time you close a door and feel that instant, automatic sense of relief, you're experiencing something your ancestors would have recognized instantly, even if none of them would have recognized the tool you're using to get it. The wall is new. The need isn't. If you had to give up either your bedroom door or your phone, which one would actually be harder to live without? Tell me in the comments. If stories like this get your brain running the way they get mine running, subscribe. There's a lot more of this coming.